webinar. Good afternoon to all, and good morning to our viewers on the West Coast, and welcome to another KLR webinar in which we will discuss subjects you have asked about. My name is Frank Monti, and I am the Director of Not-for-Profit Services Group here at KLR, and today we will be discussing fundraising responsibilities of nonprofit boards. For those of you who have participated in the previous two board development webinars, you know that in these sessions we speak about the responsibilities of the board as a whole, although individual board member responsibilities or the responsibilities of individual board members are very similar. We view the board as an entity that is a vital component of an organization's management structure, and the board itself must function in a certain manner for it to contribute to the success of the organization. The role of the board is to oversee all of the actions and decisions of the organization that eventually result in financial security for that organization. Organizations that are financially secure are more effective than those whose energy and time are consumed with wondering and worrying about where the next dollar is going to come from. And fundraising is very closely tied to financial security. This does not mean that a board member must make a personal donation to the organization that brings financial security to that organization. But board members must participate in the organization as donors to underscore their commitment to the organization and, quite frankly, to encourage others to give. The organization on which an individual serves as a board is a charity in which that board member knows a great deal, more than the average person knows about the mission, values, programs, and success of that organization. If such a knowledgeable person does not choose to include that organization in their charitable support budget, that sends a powerful message back to the community. So it is very critical that the board of a not-for-profit organization participates 100% in the fundraising efforts of those organizations. The fundraising responsibilities of the board, of course, vary with the size of the organization. If the organization depends on numerous fundraising efforts throughout the year for the majority of its revenues, then the board is likely to be highly involved in the fundraising efforts, and individual board members are likely to be directly involved in solicitation of the gifts. As organizations grow larger and there are multiple sources of revenue, then perhaps only some of the board members will need to be closely involved in the fundraising efforts. Our session today is aimed at the more common situation where fundraising is a basic responsibility of every board member, and all board members are actively involved in the fundraising efforts of the organization. I have split the session up into these 6 areas, and we will devote a little bit of time to each one. So first, let's discuss the general board roles and responsibilities in the fundraising area. If you have attended the previous 2 sessions in our board development series, you already know that the basic role of the board is one of planning and oversight. This is true in all facets of the organization's operations, and it is true in fundraising as well. Providing guidance and direction is a critically important role for the board and for individual board members. All too frequently, human beings, especially us male members, want to get involved in the action, and we overlook the very important job of standing back and providing guidance and direction and assisting in the development of a strategy. The key to attracting financial support to an organization is having an organization that attracts financial support. So what sort of an organization is this? Well, an organization with a clearly defined mission, vision, and values will more successfully attract financial support than one with a fuzzy mission, vision, and values. When the mission, vision, and set of values is related to programs and services, and the cost of those programs and services are disclosed, donors then have a compelling reason to provide financial support. Imagine, if you will, that you have a child away at college and they telephone you one day asking for $500. Regardless of how you may initially respond, you are basically thinking, how can you justify such a request? But when that request is supported by an explanation of the cost of some education-related programs and activities, you are much more easily separated from your money. Education is the mission of the college experience. Programs and activities that cost money are related to that mission, and the result is you write a check to your son or daughter while they're at college. So the same concept, the same theory applies to fundraising in the not-for-profit organization. When we've involved people in the mission and values of the organization, and we explain that achieving that mission and value costs money, and it's because of these types of programs that cost money, then the people who are interested in the mission provide financial resources to the organization. Keep in mind, however, that I'm not saying the board needs to be involved in the day-to-day action of fundraising. When it is not involved in that day-to-day action, it can stand back and perform its oversight function best. Making sure that the fundraising effort is implemented as planned is very important. Planning that is not executed is a waste of effort. In the business development area, we call that failure to implement. Because fundraising directly involves the community, it is very important that all activities follow the highest ethical rules and that all laws are complied with. An organization that does not want to engage in any unethical practices, and this is nowhere more true than it is in the donation solicitation efforts. You always want to be absolutely pure in the fundraising ethic area. Let's turn now to some basic fundraising concepts so that everyone is on the same page. We will talk about annual giving, major gifts, and something called planned giving. Annual giving is the basic fundamental fundraising that every institution should be doing. In the annual giving effort, the organization is looking for new donors and repeat donors. And you are looking at the repeat donors with an eye toward upgrading them or increasing their financial commitment to the organization. Remember, as the organization grows and increases in size, the annual giving campaign also needs to be growing and increasing. Annual giving is usually accomplished via direct mail efforts. While this is an expensive way to attract and find new donors, direct mail is very profitable when dealing with renewals or repeat donors. Membership programs are marketing techniques designed to involve donors as participants, and it gives you the opportunity to spell out different levels of giving by designing different membership levels. General Motors actually sold automobiles in this manner. People were encouraged to join the GM family by buying a Chevy and to upgrade as they got older and more affluent by progressing to Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and then ultimately to Cadillac. Many analysts believe their marketing downfall, General Motors I mean, was when they drifted away from this natural progression of customer commitment. Two organizations in America that are very good in the fundraising area, the religious organizations and the academic industry, if you think about it, make great use of this membership idea. As soon as you graduate from college, you're told that you're a member of the alumni, and the school does a great deal to try to keep you involved and keep you thinking that you're a member. And obviously, if you're a member of a religious organization, they also talk to you about being a member. And so membership programs can be very, very powerful in the fundraising area. Other types of programs that work well in the annual giving area are donor clubs, where you are soliciting higher levels of gifts with payments spread over a longer period of time, such as 6 months or even the entire year. These devices provide the organization with an opportunity to correspond more frequently with than annually with the donor, and potentially get the donor more involved in the activities of the organization. Of course, direct contact is always more beneficial than indirect contact via mail. Telephone calls to prior donors is very effective. Organized telethons also work well, and the more organized they are, the more successful they are. Callers should be trained to take good notes of the nature of their conversation. Accurate follow-up of telephone calls where warranted. Remember, an effective telephone campaign is more than just putting 20 people in a room with a bank of telephones. A variation on the donor club is the guild or association. These differ in that they combine volunteer efforts, actually working within an organization's programs, with financial support. One of the trends we are seeing as the baby boomer population retires with all that wealth they have accumulated is that donors are seeking more involvement with charitable organizations beyond just providing them with financial resources. For example, we see former President Carter actually swinging a hammer for Habitat for Humanity. Web-based giving is yet another item to include in an annual giving program. Many of the presidential candidates have very successful web-based donation programs in place. Visitors to your website are already expressing an interest in your organization just by visiting your website. So what you want to do is develop that interest into a financial commitment, and you can do that by incorporating into your website a place where people can make donations. Annual giving can also incorporate activities and special events. While these are very popular, they do cost more money than almost any other form of annual giving tactic. Lastly, many organizations use volunteer-led annual giving campaigns that incorporate a large direct, personal, and face-to-face solicitation program. Of course, these are the most difficult to control, finding the right people to do the soliciting, making sure that all solicitation ethical practices are followed, etc. Just because the labor is free, you do not want to underestimate the amount of planning that must go into these volunteer-led solicitation efforts. Next, we will look at major giving and major gifts. This is where the donor is making a gift beyond the amounts normally associated with an annual giving campaign. Of course, what constitutes a major gift is in the eye of the donor. The challenge is to identify early in the process what level of major gift is on the table. Realistically, you can't afford to spend months on a $5,000 gift, regardless of how major that gift was for that particular donor. The majority of major gifts come from individuals who have been cultivated for a long period of time by the institution. These gifts are usually associated with a giving opportunity, such as a special or capital campaign, or a specific special need of the organization. Major gifts also come from corporations and foundations. In regard to foundations, however, keep in mind there is always significant competition for this money, with more needs being expressed to the foundation managers than there are resources available to distribute. However, dealing with a foundation is in many ways similar to dealing with an individual. You want to get the individual foundation gift officer interested and committed to your organization so that he or she advocates for distributions to your organization. Corporations, on the other hand, are usually not purely philanthropically oriented. Frequently, there is some corporate objective being satisfied in conjunction with their financial support. The key here is to try to identify the needs and desires of the corporation so that you can appeal to those non-philanthropic drivers of the donation decision. As I said, individuals provide the majority of major gifts to institutions. It is actually 85%, so significantly higher than just the majority of major gifts. It is unlikely that you will meet someone today and receive a major gift from them tomorrow. These donations are frequently the result of a long period of interaction with the annual donor or member or other friend of the organization who has, over that long period of time, come to know the organization at a deep level, and feel deeply committed to its mission, vision, and values. Capital campaigns, on the other hand, have a very visible need and a goal, and are usually very efficient and productive fundraising techniques. A significant amount of planning goes on behind the scenes and in advance of the announced capital campaign, and the timing and announcements of large gifts are carefully orchestrated throughout the campaign to keep excitement and enthusiasm going. This is usually a good place to spend some money and retain a capital campaign consultant to assist you. There is a very specific science to capital campaigns, and everyone that I have seen that has hired a capital campaign consultant, the consultant has more than paid for their efforts. Special project campaigns are similar to capital campaigns. Usually they're of a shorter duration and for a lesser targeted amount of money. The campaign may be targeted to only one segment of the organization's constituency, or even to one individual or family. Planned giving. This is a subject every organization wants to hear about. When I say planned giving, it makes me wonder if all the other giving we have been talking about today is called unplanned giving. But what we mean by planned giving is that it is not in reaction to a direct solicitation by the organization, such as a capital campaign or a special purpose fundraising effort. It also usually incorporates other aspects of the donor's financial life other than his or her love for the beneficial organization. Frequently, the planned gift is actually made subsequent to the time period in which it was initiated. For example, a bequest in a will is initiated at the point in time when the person makes the will, but the gift is actually given many years later. At least that's the thought of the donor. Attracting the planned gift means understanding these cake issues and not being distracted by the frosting. There are a large number of planned giving programs, and they are beyond the scope of this session. I recommend that organizations have someone available to speak to a donor about a planned gift rather than trying to learn about all the various planned giving opportunities. Then the board and management should merely be trained on how to recognize an individual who may be ready for a planned giving discussion, so that you can then get that individual together with your resource for discussing planned giving opportunities. I know that we have done this at KLR, where a client has said to us, a donor has come forth with a desire to make a large gift and wants someone to talk to them about the various ways of putting together a planned gift, and could you speak to them about those various opportunities? And a person from the KLR Personal Financial Planning Division will usually do that and help the donor figure out what makes the most sense and what makes the best sense for them. Next, we will move our discussion onto some basic fundraising principles. The first thing to realize is that few, if any, of the board members of the organization are experienced in fundraising, although all are probably charitable donors. Board training, even beyond today's session, is essential. It is probably best to provide this training after a new board member has had about 6 months of board experience. The best people to run such a training session are your experienced, successful fundraising volunteers or a professional development person, either from your own organization or someone you retain on a consulting basis. You should conduct this training in conjunction with assigning the board member with their particular fundraising assignment. And remember, try to match the board member fundraising responsibilities to the personality of the individual board member. There are a number of different tasks associated with a successful fundraising effort, and matching the task to the correct individual is the recipe for success. The fundraising effort is similar to any other program or task that your organization undertakes. You'll be investing time and money into the fundraising program, and like any program activity, careful planning that includes a budget and an expected outcome will take time and effort. One of the critical aspects of fundraising, of raising funds for charitable organizations, is the realization that donors are donating because they have certain expectations and aspirations for the use of their money. So the organization is doing much more than trying to separate someone from their money. Rather, you are involving the donor in the mission of the organization and inspiring them to become a part of the effort, just as the board is a part of the organization's effort, but in a different manner, that of a resource provider. So we need to get set in our minds that resource providers are one of the partners in the organization, and the more contact and knowledge that these people have, the better they will be as resource providers to the organization. This next slide is something called the development triangle, or the hierarchy of giving. I think it is one of the most important things we're going to go over today. Understanding the concepts exhibited in this graphic is key to the long-term success of an organization's fundraising efforts. On the left side of the triangle, you can see the three phases of an organization's relationship with a donor. It moves from initial donor content up to a phase we call donor growth, and ends where we have total donor commitment. Looking at the right side of the triangle, we see the organization first seeks to identify people with an interest in the organization and its mission. Then you feed that interest with information, hopefully resulting in a growth in interest, which eventually becomes a desire for involvement, ultimately culminating in a significant investment in the organization by donors committed to its mission and purpose. Inside the triangle, we see the activities in which this donor contact and donor growth occurs. It's no secret that the academic industry does an excellent job working this hierarchy of giving. As an alumnus more than 30 years outside of college, I can attest to the 30-year effort to move me up this triangle. And I won't comment on how successful the institution has been. So now that you have experienced the hierarchy of giving, what is your job as a board? Very simply, the board must lead the fundraising effort. Every board member, of course, should participate in giving to the organization. It is critical that as an organization, it can represent to the community that 100% of the board is financially committed to the organization's success. This financial commitment, more than even board service itself, sends a message that the board believes in the organization's mission. When we say that every board member should financially support the organization, this does not mean an expansion of your individual donation budget. But it does mean that the organization for which you are a board member is a recipient of some portion of your donation budget. This annual giving obligation should actually be a board policy that is clearly communicated during the board recruitment process. Now, some organizations go so far as to specify a giving level by saying to board members, you're obligated to give a donation of $1,000 or more, or $5,000 or more. Some organizations try to soften that giving requirement by indicating that it is a give or get requirement. What this means is that you are going to fulfill your specified giving requirement by donating yourself or by attracting donations and getting donations up to the specified amount. I personally disagree with such requirements, so I'll be upfront about that. I believe that having such a requirement places a limitation on board service, limiting it only to those who can afford the giving level, even if it is a give or get level. I also think that it raises fundraising above attention to the mission, which, as we've said in the other sessions in this webinar series, is the primary obligation of a board member. When we examined the triangle hierarchy of giving, we identified 3 stages of fundraising. We're now going to look at those in a bit more detail. The 3 stages can be termed cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. These are not the same terms used in the triangle slide. However, the meaning is the same. We are cultivating relationships. Frequently, these are new relationships. We are then soliciting the support of these new relationships while we continue to cultivate their interest in the organization by increasing their knowledge of the organization. Ultimately, we hope to attract stewards of the organization who specifically plan how to benefit the organization in their lifetime and beyond. So let's talk about cultivation. Prospect identification and qualification is the beginning of the process. Say your organization has a fundraising golf tournament. Everyone who plays in that golf tournament is an identified prospect. But some players may only have played just to get to play on that particular golf course. That is what we call prospect qualification. If some of the people who played in your golf tournament had really no interest in your organization but wanted to play on a course they could not get onto on a regular basis, that's why they paid to play in your golf tournament. When we find out that that's why Sam Jones played in your golf tournament, then we realize that Sam is not really a prospect as a donor to the organization. So what you want to do is to find a way to separate the pure golfer from the person who played out of some interest in the organization's mission. This may take a few contacts to figure out who is interested in your mission, but then you can start the donor cultivation process. During the donor cultivation process, you are engaging in providing information to the potential donor. The information is designed to increase their awareness of the organization, increase their awareness of the organization's mission, its programs, and the program outcomes. As the potential donor learns more about the organization and expresses an interest and a desire for more information, then you continue to feed that interest. Eventually, the information provided to the potential donor begins to include discussions about the cost of the programs and activities that result in the outcomes achieved. After an individual has identified with the organization at a deeper level and begun moving into a participatory role, he is progressing in his involvement with the organization. So this is the process. It is subject to planning and execution, both of which are necessary for success, and the board's role is one of oversight, making sure that planning occurs and making sure the execution occurs. In addition to oversight, one of the primary board functions is direct participation in the fundraising effort, and this is a key factor for success. Remember, the board is the liaison between the organization and the community. Board members are unpaid volunteers. When a board member contacts a donor to thank them for a donation and to provide them information on how their donation was used, it sends a powerful message and really resonates with the donor. Yes, your development personnel and other staff can also do this, but it is not nearly as effective, is when a board member is involved with the donor cultivation process. When the fundraising process reaches the solicitation phase, board involvement can even be more critical. But board members will likely need specific training prior to participating in this phase of the fundraising effort. Earlier we said that fundraising requires time and effort. Board training is where some of that time and effort is expended. Just as all aspects of running a not-for-profit organization require planning, so does the gift solicitation effort. Before asking a potential donor for a significant gift, be sure you know that the prospect is interested in the project or item for which you will be soliciting financial support. You do not want to approach a prospective donor unless you have some solid indication of their inclination to give. Before approaching a specific donor, you want to have a specific gift amount or a range of giving opportunities in mind. Then you want to carefully determine who should participate in the solicitation call and carefully select the time and place to meet. You want to be able to offer specific donor recognition options because you want to recognize the donor publicly, and the donor should never have to ask for recognition. Rehearsing is part of planning. We practice for everything important in life, and this is no exception. In your rehearsal, anticipate both the yes and the no answer. Plan for each one so that you are not left there sitting in a silent room. Remember, the no answer may mean many things. If you have planned and anticipated for the no answer, you will not react like it is a personal rejection. This will give you an opportunity to learn from the no answer. During this process, you may learn that the no answer may only mean not yet, and that your ability to get from the no answer to the not yet discussion will depend on your initial reaction to the no answer. So preparing for the no, in spite of the idea of keeping a positive attitude, is extremely important in the gift solicitation process. The entire organization must have the proper attitude toward donors. Donors are like the investors in the company and may expect and need attention and service just like stockholders. Now, someone who may give $1 to the Little Leaguer standing outside of the supermarket may be doing that just has to donate. This is not the objective of a fundraising plan in an organization that significantly depends on public support. The recognition that resource providers invest in organizations because of quality programs, beneficial services, and a better community is essential to building a successful fundraising effort. So when you realize that your significant donors are investing in the organization and you start to treat them as investors by giving them information and involving them more and more deeply into the organization, the more successful your fundraising effort will be. The board should attend all fundraising events. Now, I've been to many fundraising events for my clients, and I've seen organizations where they have 100% board participation at the fundraising event, and organizations where there is no board participation. Now, you might say, well, we have board members who don't play golf. Well, that's okay. The board members who don't play golf don't have to be golfers, but they can attend the dinner that usually follows the playing of golf. Board participation is very critical to cementing the link between the resource providing community and the organizations. At all events and other opportunities, the board should introduce staff and volunteers to the donor prospects. This will deepen the link that the prospect feels to the organization. In addition, As the board turns over, it is frequently the staff relationships with donor prospects that end up lasting a lifetime. So although we're talking about board responsibilities today, don't forget that introducing the staff to prospective donors and getting the donor involved with the staff is also important. Turning a donor into a steward begins after the first donation. A sincere thank you note from a board member should be part of the fundraising process. A written note should be the policy of the organization, regardless of how often the donor may have been thanked verbally. And even after the staff develop a relationship with a resource provider, the acknowledgement from the board and from a board member is very important. I previously said that board members should attend every fundraising effort. If the organization has a donor appreciation or donor recognition effort, these are certainly events at which board members must be present. Multiple thank you notes for multiple donations over a period of time is also important. Never take a donor for granted. React to each donation as if it were the first. Successful enterprises are successful to a great extent because of their processes. Just as programmatic success will be the result of a planned process implemented precisely, so too will the fundraising effort benefit from a meticulously planned and implemented process. So planning is very important. I think that's the one thing I have said in all three of the webinars on board development. Remember, however, that even though there is more hands-on work for the board in the fundraising effort, the role of the board is still primarily one of planning and monitoring, working with the staff, not in addition or instead of them. Our next agenda item involves the role of fundraising ability in the selection of board candidates. How much should we question the potential board members' fundraising ability when we are looking for new board members? It would be very beneficial for at least one board member on a board to possess significant fundraising experience. This does not mean that this person should be a fundraising professional, but someone with a great deal of past experience to be there to lead and to make the little course corrections as necessary. So if you have at least one experienced fundraising person on the board, you're off to a great start. Eventually, you want to turn all of the board members into experienced fundraising people. In addition, all board members should know what the expectation is of them in the fundraising area before they commit to board service. So you don't want to recruit a board member and then after they've been a board member for 6 months, suddenly tell them they have a great deal of fundraising responsibility. There are people who are very uncomfortable doing fundraising, and you want to know that before you solicit that person to be on your board if that's going to be a problem. Evaluation of fundraising efforts. You know, in business development, we say you can't manage what you do not measure. And that will be the theme of these next few slides. If you only measure the ultimate outcome, then that does not give you the opportunity to manage too much. If we use baseball as an example, then there has been a revolution over the past 20 years or so on how to improve the performance of a baseball team. This was actually the subject of the recent movie called Moneyball. Once upon a time, baseball evaluated pitchers, for example, by looking at their won-loss record. Today, however, baseball is measuring a number of items in a pitcher's performance: the number of strikes versus balls, how many first pitch strikes, the number of pitches thrown. Each one of these statistics provides an opportunity for management, an opportunity for change, and an opportunity for improvement. So too, the more aspects of the fundraising effort that you track and measure, the better you can manage the entire fundraising effort, and the better the ultimate outcome from those efforts. Some aspects of the fundraising effort, of course, will be more difficult to measure than others. Activities that are designed to result in more planned giving present a special challenge, since the planned giving donor is making a gift after a long-term relationship with the organization. But this does not mean that you cannot measure and manage the individual projects and programs that comprise the planned giving effort. It takes time and effort and may be worth investing in some outside professional assistance. The annual giving process, on the other hand, presents a wealth of easily identified measurements that will assist you in managing this component of your fundraising effort. Tracking the number of new members added from various efforts will help you manage the donor prospect acquisition process so that you spend your time and effort only on activities that result in the highest percentage of success. Tracking donor renewals will help you manage the donor communication process for existing donors, which should be different from the donor communication process directed at potential new donors. Various efforts aimed at increasing donor giving levels should be measured so that only the more successful efforts are repeated, managed, and improved. I have one client that takes their past annual giving donors and designs 5 different letters to send out to a sample of 20 different donors. So 5 letters going to 20 donors is 100 letters. And they're asking those donors to, again, give to the annual campaign. And each of the letters has a different way of asking the donor to increase their level of giving from the prior year. Then the organization takes the results from the 5 letters and determines which letter got the best result, and then it uses that letter for the rest of the annual giving donors to try to get all of those donors to increase their level of donation. I'm always amazed at the fundraising efforts that are directed towards me. Frequently, I get an annual giving renewal, and it mentions the same amount year after year after year, and then after 5 years or so, it suddenly makes a pledge reminding me about inflation and wanting me to significantly increase my donation. And I say to my wife, you know, they should have just asked for a little increase every single year, and they would have actually gotten more money than trying to move us from X to X plus 50% 5 years from now. Tracking growth. Here are more opportunities for measurement. As you measure the results of your various fundraising efforts, you see what works best and repeat only what is working. Remember, the definition of insanity is performing the same action while expecting a different result. When you are not measuring results, the probability of engaging in insane behavior increases significantly. Here are some more measurement opportunities. These are devoted to efforts aimed at increasing gift amounts over time. Here are some industry statistics on fundraising activities. You see that acquiring new donors via direct mail is actually a losing proposition. That means it costs more to find a donor than the average cost per new donor found. So why would we engage in direct mail donor acquisition campaign? Well, if you turn these new donors into renewal donors the following year, the cost drops significantly. Special events are another expensive way of attracting new donors. But if you follow up and turn these new donors into members, then they become very low-cost repeat donors. Once again, I'm amazed at how many times I play in a charity golf tournament and then never hear from the charity again until the next year's golf tournament. These are obviously organizations who do not understand the donor acquisition and donor development process and are not managing an organization's fundraising effort. Here are some more solicitation cost figures. And you'll notice that I obtained these from a book published in 2002. But these cost figures are probably still indicative of the relative cost of various fundraising activities, even though costs tend to rise faster than the level of donations. While I was preparing today's webinar, I looked to see if there was a newer edition of this book, and there is not. It's still for sale on Amazon, and it has a great deal of fundraising fundamentals in it. If you're serious about a fundraising effort and sharpening your processes for fundraising, I would recommend obtaining the book, even though it is now almost 10 years old. If, as a result of this webinar, you're going to go back to your board and talk up a more robust fundraising effort, realize that the results you are looking for will be a number of years away. You cannot run a special event today and make some money. Well, you can run a special event today and make some money, I'm sorry, but it will take another couple of years to turn some of those special event participants into qualified donor prospects and donors. And one of the mistakes I see my clients making very frequently is they'll spend some money on a fundraising effort, and then they only evaluate the results of that effort for a year or two, and then they say, well, this isn't worth the money. You need to realize that getting people first into that bottom portion of the triangle is expensive. Moving people up the triangle is perhaps not as expensive, but very time-consuming. And we all would love to have 100 people make a planned gift to our organization. We'd like to have 100 people become stewards of the organization today. We'd like to have 100 people be invested in the organization so that they're committed to making the organization better and being a strong and powerful resource provider. You cannot find those 100 people today. You have to start at the bottom of the triangle and develop those 100 people from 1,000 people that you'll run into. In summary, what I hope we have demonstrated today is that the fundraising effort is not just about asking for money. Fundraising is a science that works best when approached scientifically through a well-planned process, implemented properly, managed continuously, and evaluated regularly. So that brings us to the close of this webinar. I thank you very much for listening. I didn't get any questions directed to me during the seminar, but if you have questions later, don't hesitate to email me at the address on your screen now, or call at any time. Also, I encourage you to visit the KLR website. If you're not already a recipient of our weekly e-newsletter, I encourage you to sign up for that. Each one of the weekly e-newsletters, we have something on of special interest to nonprofit organizations. So with that, I will sign off. Thank you again for attending.